Okay, thank you very much. Lunch and Learn this week and next week also, and we'll see about the week after, is going to be devoted to Hanukkah and gaining a better understanding, hopefully a deeper understanding, and understanding how it is very much relevant to us today, to our world today, how the battles that were fought then are battles that are being fought today. And also, we'll have a glimpse, I'm not sure if it'll be this week or next week, we'll get a touch of it, yeah, about how the sages, in their cryptic manner, reveal to us the essence of all of these battles. Okay? And once again, a thanks to... this is, the website is
Alpha Beta?
No, it's not Alpha Beta. But it's the Morisha syllabus. That is nothing to do with the Morisha school that was here in California. But the Morisha syllabus, which puts together wonderful sources on many, many, many important Jewish topics. Okay, so we begin with the first source on the first page there, which is based on Yitzhak Breidovitz from the Jerusalem Kollel, and the battle that ensued, the clash of civilizations, the clash of outlook, is, as he puts it, who is at the center of the universe. And he writes, a striking aspect of celebrating Hanukkah each year is the realization that the very same ideological battles that were fought 2,200 years ago, which prompted the Syrian-Greek offensive against the Jewish people, culminating in the Hanukkah miracles, are still being waged today, and are poignantly relevant to the life of every Jew. How can this be? The Syrian-Greek war against Israel, replete with tank-like elephants and over 100,000 skilled soldiers, seems like an anomaly to Greek philosophy. The Greeks, home to the schools of Plato and Aristotle, sought to systematically understand and classify knowledge of the world. They were primarily intellectuals, philosophers, not militants. Why would the Syrian Greek army attack the Jewish nation? Israel is not a military threat. The Syrian Greek target was Judaism, and Judaism alone. Jews who adopted the Greek worldview of Hellenism were embraced. Right? Interesting to note that in Halacha, one of the reasons given why on Purim the mode of celebration is through a seudah, through a big festive meal. On Hanukkah, it's not necessarily through a meal. It's really through Hallel v'Tishbachot, through our praises to God. Because this is not a time where we were endangered with extermination, like Haman wanted to do to us. Right? But rather, it was an onslaught against our spirit, our connection to God. Those who adopted the Greek worldview, those who were Hellenized, as it was said, were embraced. Hellenism was certainly a challenge for many Jews attracted to the intellectualism and the logic of the Greek culture that postulated that man created religion. Nevertheless, what was so appalling to the Syrian Greeks that they sought to destroy Judaism and her adherents? What's wrong with, this is our intellectual view, but we're not militants, and others will have different views. The Greeks taught that man was the center of the universe. There is no God with a capital G. There might be many little lowercase gods, but no God with a capital G. One does not look beyond the physical world. It is man who has the need to create God. In contrast, Judaism teaches that man is almost at the center of the universe. But the primary force is God, who created, sustains, and guides the universe, creates man with a divine soul, and empowers us with the ability to impact both this world and eternal spiritual worlds that transcend physical existence. So we are almost at the center. We and our actions, even our thoughts and our words, affect this physical world and affect the spiritual realms, the eternal spiritual realms. The Greeks could not tolerate that the Jewish people lived Judaism as a dynamic reality, which was an affront and threat to Greek thought and culture. And this idea is something that Rabbi Sachs writes extensively about. There's just a recent, I saw an article this morning, I don't know if it was a recent report, that seemed to indicate that when there is a spike in anti-Semitism, then there is soon to be a spike in general terrorism that will follow. When he writes that when there is no room in this world for the other, then that pool of others keeps growing. The famous quote, when they came for the communists, I wasn't a communist. They came for the trade unionists, I wasn't a trade unionist. They came for the Jews, I wasn't a Jew. When they came for me, and therefore I didn't protest. When they came for me, there was no one left to protest. And it is this inability to allow anyone other than those who are just like me to exist. And that was the affront that the Jewish people lived this Judaism as a dynamic reality. That was the affront, the threat to Greek thought and culture. 2,200 years later, the Jewish world is still divided between those influenced by Hellenism, who view Hanukkah and Judaism as tradition, sentimental value that contributes some meaning to life, but ultimately is not real. And in contrast, those who see Judaism as a reality, where each action has cosmic implications.
Wasn't there a school of thought with that? Oh, there was a creator, but he did it, put everything here, and left. Didn't they have something like this?
Yeah, I don't know if that was the
Aristotle or something?
I don't know. I don't know. In general, we have to realize that the holidays are not these nice, warm, fuzzy commemorations of events that took place way back in our history, but rather, as we often say, time from a Jewish perspective is not a straight line stretching out, but it is a circle. It is cycles. And the same way that we believe that comes Rosh Hashanah every year, we are judged on the following year. And the same way that Yom Kippur is not, that was the day that God forgave the sin of the golden calf, and Moses came down with a second set of tablets, and that speaks of forgiveness. So we remember fondly that forgiveness that took place then, but we view it as a Yom Kippurim, a day of atonement, a day of cleansing on a yearly basis. Similarly, Shavuot, the time of the Torah, and Sukkot, the time of our happiness and of that heavenly connection, and certainly Pesach, the time of our exodus from Egypt, are times that in each year we revisit that potential for freedom, that connection for Torah, and that connection to the sheltering wings of Hashem. And the rabbinic holidays. In the Talmud we hear about something called Megillat Ta'anit, which was a scroll where they had many, many, many important event days in the Jewish calendar. Some happy, some tragic. But of those, there's only 2 which have become incorporated throughout time as an annual holiday. And the reason for those 2 being incorporated is that the sages at that time, with their spiritual sensitivity, sensed that it's back again. It was not a one-time event that took place, but the spiritual forces that were at play, which allowed that to reach its zenith, its fruition. It's back again. We can feel it again. It's here again. And they understood that that had become part of the annual cycle. I like to compare it to Epcot City, which I've never been to. But I understand that when you go to Epcot City, you actually enter these different pavilions of different countries. And it's not that there, you hear about that country, but you enter into the music and the vibe and the store type and the culture. You enter into that. So too we travel, we enter these different stations. And therefore, in Sittei Chaim, Rav Chaim Friedlander explains, based on the tefillah, the prayer of Al Hanisim, that is the special prayer that is inserted both into the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei of Chanukah and of Purim. Obviously, we tell a different story, Chanukah and Purim. And also into the Birkat HaMazon, the benching, the grace after meals. We say over there, Sha'asita Lavoteinu, Bayamim Hahem, Bazman Hazeh. That which you did for our predecessors in those days, at this time, right? Bizman hazeh, and he explains. Kol ha'moedim, I have both in Hebrew. I read in English. I read in Hebrew. Translate to English. Follow as you wish. Kol ha'moedim v'yam tov v'sheish lanu. All of the holidays and set times that we have. Einam chagim historiyim. They're not this historical events. Lizkar ha'avar, to remember the past. Shechalaf, that is long past. El Kol Yerim, all of these events, HaYishurot, the redemptions, V'Hashem Ruchani, and the spiritual availability, V'Gashmi, and physical blessing, Shaya, that was Mitoru Mitchadshim Midei Shana B'Zmaneihem. They return on a yearly base at these times. Ach midat hashpa v'ha'hitalut ha'miyuched el chomo eid shemekabel kol echad Hashem yitbarach tlui v'mirat ha'chana shelo. Okay. But the amount, he says the form of I would say even the amount perhaps better, of this effect and this elevation that could be attained during these times, Tuluya is dependent, b'midat ha'chana shelo, on our preparation, right? Haibonenut b'mahut hayom, our giving thought to the essence of what this day is. V'hitchazkut haba'a bikvoteha, and the strengthening that comes about as a result of it. V'kein hu b'yimei Chanukah. So too when it comes to Chanukah. Im kein, therefore aleinu la'avin, we need to understand ma haita galut Yavan. What was this exile of the Greek Syrian kingdom? Kidei shnitoreh l'takein et kilkuleh, in order that we can arise to overcome its consequences, its dangers. And we can then strengthen the illumination that comes about each and every year. Now, it's important to note, we'll touch upon this again at later points.
Rabbi,
yes?
what do they mean by harmful consequences? Or,
I think he's referring to the influences that the Greeks had on us as a nation, and there were many who fell to their persuasion. Right? There were many Jews who became Hellenized, and as is unfortunately not uncommon, it was those Jews who became Hellenized who had become our worst enemies, and those who were coming after us with a real vengeance, which is not something that was limited to that time period.
Yeah.
But unfortunately is something that is a bit recurring.
Why they call it Helen? Was Alexander was the one and doing this?
Okay, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I included a timeline of the Hanukkah era, so we have an understanding just of when it's placed. Right? The Jewish year 3408, which was 353 before the Common Era, that was the building of the second temple. Okay, the Greek era began in 319 BCE. And 199 BCE, Antiochus III, right, took control of Israel. 175 BCE, Antiochus IV reigns. And 168 BCE, the temple was desecrated by Antiochus. Okay, and that we are familiar with. 3 years later, 165 BCE, was the conquest of the temple, the rededication of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, by the Chashmonaim. And that we know involved the improbable, miraculous victory in war, and so that we would not think that it was simply just a great military conquest, we also had a second event about Hanukkah. Besides the war, Eliezer, what is that second event by Hanukkah that we celebrate? The miracle of the oil, right? That they found one flask of oil, and that should have lasted for 1 day. Miraculously, it lasted for 8 days, right? And then what do they do on the 9th day? And why couldn't what they did on the 9th day, why can't they do it on the 7th day? If you know, let us think about it for a moment. Or we make a big deal, there was enough for 1 day, and it burned for 8 days. So, what do they do on the 9th? And whatever they did on the 9th, why couldn't they have done it on the 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, etc.? What's the magic of it burned for 8 days?
It took that long to get the new oil consecrated.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the two approaches are either it's a 7-day purification process, and that's what needs to be done before new oil could be properly produced, right, in a state of purity that it could be used in the temple. And others say that there was oil further away, but it was a trip to get there, and therefore, at that time, it took that at the time to get the supply route up and running.
Isn't the winter solstice 1 day, but the darkness comes 4 days and then 4 days, and then like the span of 8 days is when it's still light, and then 8 days later the light is coming again. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with it.
No, look, on a deeper level perhaps, but I'm just speaking in a practical sense. Right, the oil lasted miraculously for 8 days. Right. What happened on day 9? Okay, the Chashmonaim ruled from 140 BCE to 36 BCE. The Romans, the rule of the Roman governors and the Herodian dynasty was 36 BCE to 68 CE. And the temple was destroyed by the Romans in the Jewish year 3862, 68 CE of the Common Era. Okay. The Rambam writes, Maimonides writes, B'bayit Sheni in the second temple, Kishemalchu Yavan, when the Greeks ruled, Gazru Gezerot al Yisroel, they decreed these decrees against Israel, Ubitlu Datam, and they tried to destroy our religion. V'lo inichotam, not allowing us lasok b'Torah, to be involved in Torah, to study Torah, uva mitzvot, or to perform mitzvot. And we'll see next week there were specific mitzvot that were targeted, and we'll see why. Upashti adam v'mamonam, and their hands stretched out against our money, our assets, uvit binotehem, and against our daughters. There's actually a term, either a Greek or Roman term, that whoever we get married had to first be with the governor, and that was a way of showing their absolute control over us. V'nichnasu leheichal, and then they entered into the heichal, into the temple itself. Upartsu bo pratzot, and they defiled it. V'timu taharot, and they made that which was pure impure. V'tsar lehem Yisroel ma'om mipneihem, and put us through tremendous anguish. V'lachatzum lachatz gadol, tremendous hardships. Ad sherichem aleim al kei avaseinu v'oshiam mi'adam v'yitzilam, until God, the God of our fathers, had compassion upon us and saved us from their hands. As I started to say before, the Greek exile is unique. Is unique amongst, when we speak about the major exiles. And what is unique about it is that it doesn't really seem to be a galut. When we think of galut, we think exile, we think of being sent out from the land. Yes, the Greek exile took place while we were in the land and the Beit HaMikdash stood. So we were not sent out from Israel, we were in Israel, and the Beit HaMikdash stood, the temple was standing, yet the exile was more, well, we can be in exile even if we are physically in the land. That
was the first temple?
Second temple. That's why I want to get that timeline. This is all during the time of the Second Temple era. Okay? Now, let's go further into this Jewish study network. The story behind the events of Hanukkah begins with the Greek conquest of the kingdom of Judea by the military force of Alexander the Great in 320 BCE. Not content to be mere military conquerors, the Greeks maintained a vision of conquest that extended beyond just physical subjugation. They wanted their culture to dominate the world, and hence always sought to spread its influence within the territories under their control. Long before the actual events of Hanukkah took place, Greek culture, known as Hellenism, started to make itself felt within the Jewish population.
But to reinforce what you said before, is this not Muslim Islam now? It's the same thing, no?
That everyone has to follow their way. Yep. That certainly is amongst the extreme adherent, the adherents of extreme Islam, right? Which we like to believe is not the main body there.
This is just an extension of Egypt. The same thing was going on over there, and then the Greeks took it on.
To me, it's kind of different. The Egyptians, it wasn't so much that they wanted us to believe in their gods; they wanted us.
No, that's why they wanted to kill all the boys. So we were going to not have any Torah, not going to have any Jewish.
Again, over there, I think it was more of a physical domination, which certainly had its spiritual effects on us, but it wasn't a culture and a philosophy that they were trying to.
More like the Spanish Inquisition.
Yes, look, certainly the Crusades was of a similar idea, right? That of the destruction that was brought upon the Jewish communities, right, on their way there. Was absolutely staggering.
But the Crusaders didn't discriminate. They wiped out anybody that was not just the Jews.
Yes, but I think we had a special place in their hearts.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Back to what you were just reading. What portion of Jewish population, was kind of adhering to that Hellenism?
That's an interesting question.
Was it 50-50 or 90-50?
I can't answer that, but it was certainly a major. Yes, yeah. I couldn't give you numbers, but it was certainly a major segment that had a tremendous. Elsewhere, in certain ways, during the times of the Enlightenment, right? In the 1800s, that was a similar thing.
Right.
That Jews love the isms, right? We're people who love the thoughts and the thinking and the possibilities, and I think there is a certain degree that's mixed in also, that when it's a worldview that doesn't put requirements and restrictions on me, even better, right? Even better, and that has been something that we as a people have been struggling with, right, from the get-go.
Isn't kind of modern orthodoxy a response to that, to put external cultural forces in the appropriate place and still let it play out, but not have it hold the main sway?
I don't think modern orthodoxy is looking to take external society things and institute it. I think it's more of an openness to general society than looking to institute.
No,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. It doesn't hold sway, but it's not that you can't have anything to do with it either.
Okay. Yeah. Bob?
No.
No.
Scratching my beard.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, as Paul Johnson notes in The History of the Jews, the impact of Hellenization on educated Jews was in many ways similar, as I said, to the impact of Enlightenment on the 18th century ghetto. It was a destabilizing force spiritually, and above all, it was a secularizing, materialistic force. In response to Hellenization, the internal conflict soon arose within the Jewish people, as those who favored the new trend confronted those who did not. Eventually, they developed a movement of Jews whose aim it was to force the pace of Hellenization by purging Judaism of those elements that limited the advancement of Greek culture. Right? That should be the overriding force. In the year 175 BCE, these Jewish Hellenizers gained a powerful ally with the ascendancy of Antiochus IV Epiphanes to the thrones of the Seleucid Empire. Like those before him, he was disturbed to find the Jews still holding on to their own religion and worshiping their own God in blatant disregard of the Greek deities. To further advance the cause of Hellenization, Antiochus issued decrees banning any religious or cultural practices not in line with Hellenism, particularly the observance of Brit Milah, right? Because we understand that if from their point of view the human being is the center, right? So why would one tamper with the human body as it is, right? They glorified the human body, right? The Olympics was all about the strength, and the original Olympic Games, right, were a full expression of the human body, without anything to hinder one's appreciation of that full human body, right? Right? That was their worldview, right? It is sadly ironic that the Jewish Olympic Games are given the name the Maccabee Games, right? Which was not really. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, the Maccabees weren't competing, in the shot put and the discus throw and the javelin throw and beating. Rather, they were fighting against that whole culture. Once again, I mean, I personally love sports, right? So there's nothing wrong with sports, but that it cannot be, when it leads to the worship of and the self-aggrandizement of the human body. That's when it is a serious problem.
Rabbi, you think they were anti-tattoo?
Okay, right? Shabbat, right? Shabbat, which is the sanctity of time, right? And the time when we put all of our creation, I don't say creative, but creation activities on pause to fully appreciate the creation of God. And Rosh Chodesh, which is very interesting, why they would single out Rosh Chodesh being the new moon. And once again, it is Rosh Chodesh can be on different days. Right? The Jewish New Year is comprised of 6 29-day months and 6 30-day months. And if a month will be either the 29 or 30 days is dependent upon the witnesses coming and giving their testimony of the sighting of the new moon and a proclamation of the Beit Din. And then what follows is that we control the flow and the holiness of time. Because based on when Beit Din will proclaim Rosh Chodesh, that will determine when is the Passover Seder, when is there a mitzvah to eat matzah, when must one stop eating the chametz, when is Rosh Hashanah, when is the Day of Judgment, when is the Day of Atonement, etc., etc. Antiochus was a vicious dictator bent on the destruction of Judaism. Women who circumcised their babies were executed with their dead babies hung around their necks. Hard to even say such words. A special directive was also sent to stop the sacrificial service in the temple. The temple itself in 168 BC was desecrated and turned into a place where non-kosher animals were offered to the pagan gods. Once again, it was an attempt to completely humiliate us and bring and our practices and bring us up to date with the new way. The new way of the world. Yes,
I think Abraham Heschel's book, The Sabbath, focuses completely on the concept that we Jews don't worship things, concrete things, but that we focus our worship in sanctifying time.
Yeah. Yes.
The time is the reality,
yeah.
not concrete objects.
Yeah. You know, and along those lines, it's been said very beautifully. You know, that Shabbos is the time where we suspend all the things that we do, right, and focus on who we are, right? You know, very often, you know, so what are you? Oh, I'm a doctor, or I'm a lawyer, I'm a rabbi, right? You know, is that what you are? Is that what you do, right? And Shabbos is even the daber davar, even the way that we speak, right? The things that we speak about in Shabbos are meant to be different, right? And we can focus on what we truly are as opposed to what we do. The story behind the events of Hanukkah begins with the Greek conquest of the kingdom of Judah by the military force of Alexander the Great. I'm sorry.
Hello.
I'm sorry. Oh boy.
Is there
when I was doing some copying and pasting here.
So maybe Talmud Bavli is the next one.
Yeah, let's continue over there. Okay. The Gemara speaks about the Hanukkah miracle. Now we are on the third page here, towards the middle. Not continued. Continued was a bit of a typo that I didn't include, or that I wanted to include. Okay. Now, the Gemara, as Warner mentioned, this took place during the second temple. Okay? The closing of our scripture, of our Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, took place at the start of the second temple, with Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah, and that's the end of our scripture, of Tanakh. Therefore, there is nothing in Tanakh about all that took place Hanukkah. Right? We did quote before that brutal mention about the punishment for those who did circumcise their children. That's from the book of Maccabim, but that is not something that was canonized as part of our Tanakh, but rather it is in the Talmud, in the Mishnah and in the Talmud, that we have mentions of Chanukah. My Chanukah, what is Chanukah? The Gemara answers, when the Greeks entered into the sanctuary, Timu kol hashemanim, they defiled all of the oil. And when the king of the Chashmonaim became stronger, Meniskim and defeated them, Badku, they searched shemen. They only able to find one flask of oil, shemunach, that was found b'chotamo, with the stamp, right, certifying the kashrut and the purity. That was stamped by the Kohen Gadol. And there was only enough oil there to burn, to kindle for one day. Nasibones, right? A miracle happened. And they were able to light from that for 8 days. L'shana acheret, the next year, kiva'um, it was established va'asa'um, and it became Yom Tovim b'halel v'hoda'ah. It became days of praise and thanksgiving.
How they know to do this to the oil?
How they know to do what to the oil?
They defiled the oil. How they know to do this?
How did the Greeks know to do it?
Yeah.
They got in there and they smashed and defiled everything.
Just smashed
whatever they
it?
got their hands on.
It wasn't like they targeted the oil.
I
They
don't
probably
think so.
saw Hebrew letters on it
Yeah.
too.
Right? They ransacked.
Yeah.
Rav Hirsch
With the OU.
writes about what was meant to be and what could have been the almost partnership of Israel and Greece. In Bereshit, the Torah said the Lord has given Yaft Elokim liyefet. Hashem has given beauty to Yefet. V'yishkon ba'alei Shem, and it will reside in the tents of Shem. Shem was one of the sons of Noach. Yefet was another of the sons of Noach. In Yefet come together reason and the desire for the spiritual. Yefet, that's one of the sons of Noach again, reaches peak in the culture of Yavan, Greece. Right? Yavan was one of his children. Until today, these two remain. Right? Hirsch writes, Israel and Yavan, representing Sinai and humanism, respectively. Yefet beautified the world from an aesthetic point of view, while Shem enlightened the world from an ethical, moral perspective. Yefet prepares the ground for the mission of Shem. First, let a person be imbued with the ideas of the beautiful and the good in the spirit of the Greeks. Afterwards, let him proceed to be imbued with that which is still more beautiful, elevated, and harmonious, which is the godly. There's a conflict between two perspectives of life, two cultures, which until today are struggling for dominance in the world. The Greek nation stood at the pinnacle of culture of all the descendants of Yefet. The Greeks taught to all other nations the beautiful, and explained that which is beautiful is also good. However, the pinnacle of the culture of the children of Shem stood Aver, whose descendants became the Hebrew nation, which plants its tents according to the will of Hashem. In order to sanctify His name, they build the temple of justice and love. Right? Not just beauty and good, but justice and love. Right? Beautiful can be very, very, very misleading. The mission of both cultures is to cover the animalistic nakedness in man. Both were destined to raise man to the level of the human and the godly, and to subdue by proper education the influence of Ham. That was the third son of Noah, the hot-blooded roughneck who desires the animalistic nakedness. All of the history of the world till our day represents the constant struggle regarding the above prophecy of Yaft Elokim Liyefet. The culture of Greece aroused the desire for logic, enlightenment, yearning for great ideas, and the opening of the spiritual life of a person through contemplation of harmonious and beautiful essences of things, and by means of the control of his overwhelming desires. So did the culture of Greece develop the feeling of self-respect within man. It could arouse trust in oneself and give a person responsibility for the conduct of his life. In short, the spirit of Greece freed man from the chains which bound him, enlightened him with culture, beautified his spirit, and filled him with the joy of life. The spirit of enlightenment which emanated from Greece in its pure form never constituted a danger to the holy ways of Israel inasmuch as Israel sees it as a contributing cause to the realization of its own destiny, which is enlightenment of man and his improvement. Then it was always proper to bring into his tent the truth and pure humanity associated with that spirit. So it was meant to set the stage, and there's a lot of positivity there. However, there was the danger, as we'll soon see, right? Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish explains the pasuk. Shimon ben Lakish pater kra. This is from the Medrash. Pater karya begaliot va'aretz hayta tohu vavohu. We're talking about the confusion and the mixture of the land at the time of creation. So the sages say that each of those terms of the discombobulation of the big mixture and confusion there refers to a different galut, a different exile that we went through. Choshech, darkness. Zu galut Yavan. That, fascinatingly, that they attribute to, they connect to the exile of the Yavan, of the Greeks. Shehechashicha einehem shel Yisroel b'gzeiroteim. That they darkened our eyes with their decrees. Now, at first glance, we would say, what do you mean? This was similar to what we said before, the Enlightenment. This wasn't darkness, this was beauty, this was light, this was a whole new way of looking at things. Why darkness of all terms? And once again, we have from the Siftei Chaim. Afal Pikein. We'll just go into English, we're running late. This time period is called the Greek exile. The term exile does not only refer to time periods when the Jews were exiled from the land of Israel, as the Babylonian exile. Exile is the removal of the holy presence.
That's a remarkable statement.
Yeah. Our disconnection.
One would never think of that in that. We think of it in concrete terms.
Correct. Right? Exile is the removal of the holy presence, the Shekhinah, occurring when the spiritual connection between God and the Jewish people is weakened or disconnected. This comes about in situations where non-Jews rule over the Jews spiritually, and the Jews are influenced by their culture and behave according to the ways of the nations. Defining Yavan, Greece, as darkness opposes what is accepted in the world and what is known from the history of the Greeks since the blossoming of enlightened human civilization was rooted in Greece. Development of philosophy, science, culture, and their dissemination from the Romans to the great empires that followed, including the Arab nations, all founded themselves on the wisdom of the Greeks. It remains the basis of culture and science today. Yet the sages determined that this worldview is darkness. The reason for being coined darkness, since the Greeks were so scholarly, it was their intention to compete with the Torah's wisdom and with the Torah nation. Not seeing it as a supplement, as an aid, but seeing it as a replacement. The Maharal explains the Greeks wanted to destroy the special relationship of the Jews to the Torah, according to the principle that a strong nation is jealous of another strong nation, and therefore wanted to dispossess them of their Torah. In fact, since the Greeks were wiser than other cultures, they specifically viewed the Jewish nation as a threat to their stature. Their goal was to translate the Torah into Greek and to transform Judaism into a subculture of Greece. Right? The Greeks, the Septuagint, is a Greek translation of the Torah. Right? They, instead of recognizing that they were taking a large step towards the true, fully imbued spirituality, they wanted to say that that is all that there is, and, as is always the case, to cut down and destroy anything that is above, anything that is beyond, anything that challenges their worldview, right? Actually, it's interesting. Another term that the sages use, right, is shvichat damim, right? Spilling the blood. Murder. Well, shvichat damim is normally translated as murder. And when the sages attribute the three cardinal sins, which would be idolatry, adultery, and murder, to the three different three of the four exiles we went through, so they attribute murder to the Greeks. And once again, though there was a lot of murder, that doesn't seem to have been their main thrust. But actually, shvichat damim, we translate it as murder. But what does it literally mean?
Spilling of blood.
Spilling of blood. And when you spill the blood, the external remains the same. But what have you done?
Inside.
You have removed the life spirit that is in it. And that is, you could have all of the beauty, but keep it as an external, superficial beauty, sapped of its life spirit, of its energy, of its connection to the divine. So we'll stop here as the first stage of our discussions here of Hanukkah. But we see that we have a whole different view of what was going on there and the struggles that we have today. Yes, Linda.
So it's more insidious, it's more subtle, but it's worse because you don't see it.
That you make an excellent point.
So I have a question for you, and I don't know if there's an answer to it. I know a young Jewish woman who is influenced by the American culture, and she says, well, you have to respect my views. I respect your views as being Jewish, but I want you to respect my views. How can I reach somebody like that they're giving up their Jewish code? They're not.
You need to always respect the person. You don't always have to agree with their views.
Well, I do respect their opinion, but she's missing out on what she is.
Yeah.
Who she is.
Yeah. So again, right? It's very important to respect every person, but we don't have to agree, right? Shammai and Hillel, right? They rarely agreed. They had tremendous respect for one another, but they rarely agreed. Right? I don't have to agree with everyone's views, and we certainly don't agree with everyone's views, right? But we do want to respect the people. Yeah.
There's the mention here the enlightenment of the 18th century ghetto. Was that communism?
No, that was the Haskalah movement. That was the Enlightenment. That was
in Venice, Italy.
Yeah.
Like the first ghettos there,
and that started a lot of more rights for Jews. The Jews would now be able to be involved in different professions that until that point were,
So wouldn't communism be the same? I mean,
in Napoleon,
a similar thing.
Yeah. Yes, Jan.
So, getting back to the Hanukkah reader, the Jewish Study Network focus, when the Greeks started cracking down, I get that that's like the curse, because so many people have
That's like what?
The blessing and the curse. So many people have forsaken, so God withdraws, Hashem withdraws. But on the other hand, it also seems opposite to Sodom and Gomorrah, because there was a definite faction, you say, that still wanted to stay close to God and disagreed with the Hellenists, and also those people who really did try to keep the mitzvot at peril of their life. And then we see Abraham, saying, for the sake of 40, for the sake of 30.
They weren't all destroyed.
Pardon?
They weren't all destroyed here. We had a miracle of Hanukkah.
But in trying to do these mitzvot, these people between the period.
Oh, there are always individuals. There are always individuals who are who might be the most righteous, who, there's been no shortage of that through history. And the way that I wrap my head around that is, as we say very often, we see a very small part of a very long story.
Okay.
Right? So we see the person being, in these cases, brutally murdered, and then our belief is if they died while for doing a mitzvah, right? They reach the highest heights for eternity. That's how we go. Okay, I got a meeting now, so I'm going to stop now, and we'll continue next week with another stage of it.